Добрый день, уважаемые участники. Добрый день, те, кто нас слушает.
Good morning, dear participants. Good morning, all the public. And today I will be the moderator of a very interesting session, which is called the Green Agenda, Strategic Challenges. And I would like to present you Svetlana Radionova, Chief of Agency responsible for management of natural resources. I would also like to present you Ruslan Edelgeriyev, advisor to the President of Russian Federation, and Maksim Reshetnikov, Minister of Economic Development of Russian Federation, and we will try to present you an interesting dialogue on this topic, which is very common today, but it's still very important, very complicated, and the number of unsolved issues is still growing. We have 45 minutes, and we will try to start with short presentations by the speakers, and after that I will ask you 3 questions, general questions. And those questions will be the measures to take to stimulate and to support the efforts of business which strives to reduce the ecological burden. What can offer the government to the best companies, the role of the state in the emerging markets, in the first place the hydrocarbon market. Probably some of you will talk about the price of hydrocarbon emissions, carbon emissions, and the issues of transboundaries, carbon regulations. What does it mean and how do we prepare for it? And now I would like to give the floor to Ruslan. Thank you very much. I will try not to get in the field of competence of Maksim Reshetnikov. I think that he will give more details about his work. I would like to comment on some new ideas and some new issues which appeared after Glasgow. We've had a short pause after Glasgow, and it's understandable. It has to do with the pandemic, because right now we are putting our efforts on fight against pandemic and to prevent the social tensions. We see what have happened in Kazakhstan due to energy crisis. So we've tried to mitigate these social tensions, and that's why we haven't touched the climatic agenda. After the holidays, we started our work. Yesterday I had a conference with the president of COP26, British Minister Sharma. He will work after Glasgow. No, yeah, he will remain as the president of COP for 1 year. So this year he'll be the moderator. He'll lead all the meetings. He will help to maintain the dialogue, and he will deal with the climatic issues. What did we speak yesterday? I would like to comment on what will happen soon, what will happen now. So we spoke about the emissions of methane and the leaks of methane. In Glasgow, we have joined the initiative of United States and Europe of reducing the methane emissions for the year 2030. China and India neither joined them. No, China signed a separate agreement with the United States, and my personal proposal was that I offered to the group of countries which supported that initiative that we act like an observer, because we just don't understand the step they will take. So we would like to observe what will happen. We said that we won't participate directly right now and participate in this initiative. And there is a reason. We declared carbon neutrality and this includes the emissions of methane. And China declared carbon neutrality by the year 2070 without methane emissions. They speak only about carbon dioxide. We have included methane in the total of carbon emissions. China deals only with carbon dioxide. So we need to see how it will happen. We need clear understanding, all the calculations. We do our calculations. I think that Maksim will comment on it. There is a plan which we will implement to achieve the carbon neutrality. And yesterday I explained that by now we remain on the same place. We will see the further trends for the world, and also we had other issues. The second major trend is the abandonment of coal use, which is promoted by Europeans. United States haven't supported that initiative, no? No, the developed countries, the leaders of the green agenda, they call to the abandonment of the use of coal, but the countries which are developing countries or countries in transition period, they do not support this abandonment of coal. And we see here a double standard, and we see that in the United States and in Europe, the use of coal in energy sector has grown 20%. So today, the Russian Federation, and we declare it, we prefer coherent policy. We will not take any obligation without previous calculations, without understanding, without scientific argumentation. So it's a predictable position. We are open to the dialogue, and they all speak to us, including the United States. Soon, in January 22, we will have another conference of the leading economies of the world, and we will go back to the green agenda. We will speak about methane, about coal. And as to the internal policy, I think that the Minister for Economy will give you more details, but we do understand that the model of regulation of greenhouse gases in our country is very soft. We see it, we understand it, and we, the government, did it understanding what it was doing, because we listened to the private sector, and now they have to do their role. We have a new laws in the end of this year about the greenhouse gas emissions. From the year 23, the companies will present their reports, voluntary reports. All the companies that have emissions superior to 26,000 tons, but we speak about only only about reporting, without any payments, about any. And we also have some a number of projects which can be realized by the enterprises voluntarily. So we did a very soft regulation to help the private sector, and the private sector responded that they will do some climate projects voluntarily. So we are waiting for those projects, because in those projects there is an economic part. We have to see whether we can work in those niches, we can attract investments, and we will see it when those climate projects will be done. And we have to sit down, the state and the private enterprises, and to see the result, to appreciate the results. Yesterday I asked a question to my British Polish colleague, and they will answer in a week. I asked about the standards and the requisites, the requirements they will put on their carbon markets. And they united all the markets of this kind. They will do the commerce of carbon. Europe has closed its carbon space, but Britain is ready to interact with other markets. So we would like to harmonize our regulations with them, and that's why I ask for standards of Great Britain for those markets. We will transfer those standards to our enterprises, because we have some differences as to the structure of economy, as to the ways of reducing the carbon neutrality, but and sometimes we need to learn from them to harmonize our regulations, because this global carbon market is a huge opportunity. So we have to be there, we have to be part of this trend, and we have to participate in those markets. I think that this is the task number one, and it has to be our main goal in our economy. And finally, I would like to say that a very important aspect of climatic trend is the adaptation. Last year, 5 had to prepare their plans for adaptation, and now they are waiting for its approval by the Ministry of Transport. Also, this year, we will have the plans of adaptation by our regions. So we will join those plans, and we will have one big plan of the way to prepare for the climate change. It's very important, our forest policy. We've said before that our approach to the carbon neutrality will be through the forest policy, through the absorption of the carbon emissions accumulated in the atmosphere, because we have to reduce the emissions and we have to extract from the atmosphere the emitted carbon. And there are few countries which are able to absorb this carbon from the atmosphere, and we have a great potential, but we have to act with care, because everybody they're watching us, watching forest fires that we have. They watch if we observe all the principles which has to do with the counting of carbon, and we cannot commit any error. We cannot give any pretext for them to think that we are cheating anyway. So we have to have project of the highest quality in our forest industry, and then we will have the possibility to be part of the carbon market, and probably those rules will be applied to all the world, because this is one of the sectors which is of great importance for everybody, and there are few countries, as I said, which can act like absorber of carbon from the atmosphere. That's why I would like to center on adaptation, on forestry. We declared to all the world that we will work this way, and I think that all our country, all our citizens have to think about the reduction to historical minimum, the number of forest fires, and that's what we have to do within the framework of this process. Thank you very much, Ruslan. I'll come back to you, and I would like to talk to all of you also about the agriculture lately. We see a lot of news about the possibilities of the agriculture for the absorption of carbon dioxide, and it can be the same useful as a forest. We have a great agriculture. We have an great surface covered by agriculture, culture, so it will also help to reduce the carbon emissions and the contents of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Maxim, I would like to ask you about those soft measures that we've introduced, and those soft measures, they are combined with very strict obligations, and we have to achieve a great reduction. We still have time, but it will be complicated. So how do you see the politics of stimulation of emission reduction, of absorption of carbon dioxide?
First, regarding the goals, we have three major goals regarding our strategy of low carbon development. First of all, the Paris Agreement. We are part of this process. We're equitable, responsible player on this market. The president has announced that we are supposed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060, so we have to comply and to act in this vein. But we understand that increasing this agenda, sometimes a forced introduction of this agenda creates certain barriers, certain obstacles, which means that our business will probably experience additional pressure. So we have to act in this area, taking into account all these factors, so that with a view to providing possibilities for our business to act towards carbon neutrality, absorbing emissions, and so on and so forth. And finally, the important subject is a new niche. Agenda opens new niche, new concepts in the economy, hydrogen usage, transport, use of nuclear energy that will probably get a new chance. So that's another important area. So that we have to act further in accordance with these tasks. As regards our policy, and of course we pursue it in two areas mainly. On the one hand, what Ruslan has just said, that what we call soft regulation, soft control, that concerns the accountability and reporting on low carbon emissions. So right now we do this on a voluntary basis, but it will be done on a mandatory basis, And also, number two is the regime of climate projects. So we have achieved quite a lot here in terms of Glasgow ideas. So we've worked jointly with the Ministry of Natural Resources, climatic projects. So we are about to launch this process. And number three, the market of hydrocarbon units, which means that implies that the Russian companies are not supposed to import foreign carbon units using the Russian domestic market instead. So we are also supposed to achieve recognition on the world of carbon units and standards. Standardization system, which Ruslan mentioned, is totally construed after Western models, but now we have prepared everything to switch over to local standards in terms of accreditation, verification, and other things. So in the first 6 months of this year, the first climatic projects will be accredited. So the next stage will be the external approval of the acceptance of the system. As the next stage, we are about to launch the procedure to join the international agreement on accreditation and verification in climate this is a world practice. It's already a well-established system. So jointly with Ruslan and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our task is to actively participate in Glasgow, in implementation of Glasgow goals, because that's precisely where they talked about carbon units. And so far, we do hope that precisely the international standards that will be taken as the basis for these projects. But if we do this, we will receive two channels of confirmation. And the third channel that we are launching parallel is an attempt to reach an agreement with other countries in bilateral mode to accept our proposals, especially our partners in Southeast Asia, as we're going to facilitate and to promote this subject. So we believe that towards the end of the year we will have more projects, especially in the low-carbon impact area. So that's kind of opportunities that we're supposed to create for our businesses so as to mitigate the risks. And the second regime of our regulations is the rigid, hard regulation, which is an attempt to create the basis for pricing policy on CO2 and GHG. That's a so-called Sakhalin experiment project that has already gone through the first hearing in the State Duma. So despite the international agenda, we work quite actively in this area as well, on both the first part and the second part, and that's where we are supposed to work on the quotations and limits. So that's one of the key issues. All companies are interested in that, so there's quite a huge interest in this experiment. We are working jointly with the Ministry of Natural Resources, working with Sakhalin. We see there's a great interest displayed by regions to join this experiment. What about the carbon neutrality? It's the same deadline? 2025, 26. So the question which is the deadline we should proceed from? Yeah, that's right. So that's regarding the commercial issues. So it's quite important to all of us, jointly with the Minister of Natural Resources and the Minister of Education, to regarding the implementation of a major project that is related to the objective system of monitoring of GHG. It's quite an ambitious goal, by the way. So we're supposed to get our own model. We know that there's a world experience in that, but we need some data on that as well. Colleagues, by the way, from the United States have offered methane. Why do they take methane? What kind of impact is going to be on climate and on the economy? Because the structure of methane emissions is specific to the United States. In Europe is different. We have our own structure. We have associated oil, gas, petroleum gas, and so on and so forth. So in Europe, it's mostly agriculture. In America, it's they have their own system. So we have to calculate all this and to analyze. And the second task is to verify our hydrocarbon accounting. So how much fuel or CO2 have been emitted, and how it impacts our figures. So that's why we've launched quite a number of projects in this area. That's why the government, with support of administration and the State Duma, and also with good pressure exerted by businesses as well, we are working quite actively on that. Over the last 2 years, we've been moving in this direction. Thank you. Svetlana, now, I think it will be quite appropriate to say that Ruslan was speaking as a good cop, but you have to be a bad cop in this sense, judging by the context that we've just heard. So what kind of tools you think will be used as incentives for companies so as to move towards bright, carbon-free future? Let me start with a very simple thing. Companies count their money. So money, cash, is the most important tool for them that they pay as a carbon tax, carbon emission tax, or as they pay as damages or taxes or whatever. And then we step in, despite our, favorable and nice appearance. We have to act in a somewhat different way. So, in fact, what we are doing, we are trying to make the companies show their attitude towards environment and ecology in general. So that means what you can pay for. We watch closely what the companies are doing. Our role is not so impressive compared to the Ministry of Economic Development and Ministry of Natural Resources. We are acting more like controllers, and we agreed with the Ministry of Economic Development. So we precisely, our role is to exercise control over reporting and accounting, or their accounts. So we are going to exercise control over accounting and verification, and further down this path, probably over real emissions, and that's what we are moving towards as the legislation is gradually changing in this direction. But I've been listening quite attentively, so I think I've been a little bit upset by the fact. Well, it's all right when we talk in economic terms. It sounds so nice, but we are creating this green transition for bankers and some companies who are going to sell carbon units. But why we are doing this? From our terminology, the word environment, ecology, we are talking more about trade. We're talking increasingly about pressure on businesses and market restructuring. So initially, the climate agenda sprang up from the need for the entire world to survive. So if we think only about money and pressure on the market, restructuring the market, whether to allow certain companies or not allow, whether it's coal generation, nuclear power generation, hydrogen, or if you are going to split the markets in accordance with this mindset, we do not understand why we were moving towards there. We will tend to forget that everything is aimed towards survival on planet Earth and environment protection. We have to think about climate risks, floods, fires, everything that makes our planet suffer, and why we are ready to spend money. We are talking about this. Companies are going to spend much money. So the second objective, so probably to bring in, to carry the to deliver to the Ministry of Economic Development, to cover certain areas and to fill in the gaps that have not been filled up so far. So I'm talking about some certain waste product storage facilities, burial places. So what we have to talk about this if we want to achieve, to make a real achievement, to achieve some goals in this climate agenda. We're talking about the temperature, the world temperature that we are going to achieve as well in this area. If we want to use science in this sense, in this context, at all technologies that are aimed towards restraining this climatic change, which means our information technical reference books, our technologies, not only our technologies, the world technologies, verification, and many, many other things. So we do see our in two forms. First of all, as controllers that are supposed to control the accounting system and reporting, and number two, as a controller that exercises supervision over environmental agenda on the whole. Yes, Svetlana, but the people, there's one important point, let me comment on this. There's a climate change and there is an environmental agenda. Globally, of course, it seems like a single, one thing. But at a certain point in time, environmental agenda is the emission of waste products, of pollution, that what affects our health, climate and GHG, do not affect our health. It will probably affect our grandchildren, children. It's a kind of a distant future. On the other hand, of course, it's a global problem. But today, it's it's a sort of a global character. So today, the struggle against climate change poses a potential threat to our economy. Why? In this sense, it's not the Minister of Natural Resources, but precisely the Minister of Economic Development that is sitting here because we need to elaborate a response to these measures, but that doesn't change and that does not diminish the role of our colleagues dealing with this and talking about the enhanced producer responsibility, utilization of the dump sites, and so on and so forth. These are separate economic mechanisms, but there is a Minister of Natural Resources, but we have to follow and to watch different stages, how it affects businesses. But what I would like to say, these are two different mechanisms, two different approaches, different planning horizons. So on the whole, in a certain sense, it's a longer-term agenda.
I support, but it's very important to have all the control in your agency, and it's very important that those control they should be done by one person. Yeah, that's how two heads of one dragon, but I'm always trying to unite them, and I'm being a controller. Will always remind you that we have this major goal. Probably it's a postponed goal, but when we speak about those emissions, the change of technological management, we have to look for new technologies and also look for the best green technologies, and we will speak about this. We will use this possibility to talk to all the ministries, to all the regulators, to those who work on the politics, and I believe that we have to enforce a complex approach. It's like a puzzle. We have to combine each piece to put each piece in its place. And there is always a part which can be seen as a climatic part. Ruslan, when you thought that that company was affects the interests of banks, of rating agencies, when people go to music hall, they come there to listen to the music. They are not interested in the how this music is done. And the things that Maksim was talking about is the papers which are used by the musicians to interpret their music. So it's very important for everybody. I think that I said it wrong. What I'm trying to say is that this is not the only thing that we have to think about, because right now we're writing this melody and have to write this melody together. And I see as a consumer not only the private sector but also the society, civic society, because we defend both the interests of the private sector and the interests of the common people from the streets. So we are writing this melody together, and we have two clear roles. On the one hand, we control what's happening, and we do an important job, and we understand what do we have to do here, and we agree with the business here, and it's one of the rare occasions when we cooperate together. But we also have to remind you that the question is much bigger, much wider. I also always I agree with Svetlana, and when we have this discussion, I tell them that we are speaking either economy or climate issues. But in this period of 2 or 3 years, we understood that the global world isn't ready to see those things apart. Even Germany, which is the leader of green agenda, they have a Ministry of Economy and Climate. So the world sees those climate changes only relating it with the economy. Nobody wants to become poor, and those objectives that they have is decoupling when we have a growth of GDP paired with the reductions of greenhouse emission. Your point of view is absolutely correct, but the world isn't ready to see this issue without the economic part. Probably it's not so moral, but we see that today, with all those beautiful declarations, they aren't ready to lose their well-being. Even the most developed countries, the most cultural countries. Today, the green economy is a concept which always seen as a whole. And we see in Europe the abandonment of coal, we see the growth of price of the energy resources, and I think that now they begin to realize that those ambitious decisions, they cost a lot, and those who will pay for it are the citizens of those countries. So we spoke it several times with the president, and the main task which put the president was to use all these possibilities, but also to minimize those extra costs for our economy, to minimize the negative effect on the well-being. Speaking about climate, if any of you have used this carbon calculator, a very basic one which you can download from the internet, the only recommendation you'll have is the reduction of consumption. This reduction of consumption corresponds to the well-being, and you cannot maintain your economy without the use of new methods. So here we come back to the best practices, best technologies, and you'll have to spend money on it, and somebody will have to pay it. And as I understand, the main task of the Ministry of Economy and other stakeholders is to do it in the less harmful form. And our task is to use all the technologies which will preserve our climate, our ecology. Yes, when we do the modernization of the industry, it's easier for you to achieve all those objectives. I've just realized that nobody of you mentioned citizens as important actors of these climatic changes. I mentioned them in the part of forests. Well, I would like to join you here, all of you. All of you said that we have to avoid its negative effect on the life of our citizens. But we cannot say that the mode of life of the citizens of our country is ideal. I mean, climatic behavior, consumption behavior, because we can fight against our industry, but if our citizens spill waste, etc. Well, I can say you as a controlling organization that our citizens are much disciplined and much patriotic, and when our citizens, they understand that this is a rule and we are ready for this rule and it's explained, it's logical, they accomplish it. They do not fulfill the rules which are reasonable rules. And as to the citizens, we will have to do this step, but afterwards, I would say the same thing from the economical point of view. The reduction of carbon dioxide and the achievement of our goals, we have to work with heavy industry like energy industry, waste dumps, something that is located very far from our citizens. We have to work with big business, with medium businesses. We are working on energy efficiency with municipalities, with local heating stations, water stations. It's also a very important part of the process. But speaking about our priorities, well, it's not the first one. So we will go priority by priority. And our main priority is a reduction, maximum reduction of pure emissions for a ruble of investments. And this is something that we try to explain to other countries, because if we want to reduce those emissions, really reduce those emissions, we have to work where it's where it's efficient. So they have closed, for example, the European market, and they are solving an economic task, economic objective. But this is not the most effective way to use it, because you have to do the reforestation in Russia, you have to do the reforestation in South America, and those are the most effective measures from the economic point of view. But everybody tries to protect its own market. Maksim, you've been an economist. You talk about efficiency. Should understand that there are different kinds of efficiency. You mean that there are some actors which are very big, and if we change their behavior, it will reduce considerably the emissions. It's much more difficult to work with the citizens. It's not the question. It's not a question of difficulty. There is a number of measures to achieve the carbon neutrality. The measures that we can use in energy generation, intake and transport, they are much more efficient than the work with our citizens. In Europe, they have another measures. They have to transfer it to the citizens. In our case, we just don't need it. We can use another measures to achieve this carbon neutrality. You saw, for example, there is a movement in France with yellow Gillette, and that's because of transfer of this responsibility to the citizens. We have to work on efficient measures. It's something that has to do with ecology. We have to change the mentality. I always say it in all the platforms, all the venues, and in 10 years we will think differently. We're now speaking about the climate, about the ecology, and we see it as a way of consumption, but it's a very new thing. But the same thing, for example, with the security belts in car. We weren't using them at all, but right now everybody uses them. So we will change our mentality, or turn into the right or to the left, let pass the pedestrian. It's a culture of consumption, and we will be there sooner or later. Well, that's all for today. It's been a very interesting discussion. We've discussed a lot of things, and I think that we've helped those who are interested in this field to understand it better. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.